Welcome back to I Got Board Game
Woo!
Friday.
Friday.
And for this Friday, we're actually doing something different that we haven't done yet on this channel in our videos. And I did not tell John. No, I told him. Instead of a review, we're going to do a preview tonight. And what that means, if you've ever seen other board game channels, they do videos of previews or even first impressions. So for us here, what this preview video and future ones will mean is we're going to be talking about a game that is coming out that we don't have yet, and we haven't played at all yet because we're not successful board game YouTubers who get games from publishers ahead of time. But maybe in the future. So then today, our preview is, again, not going to include necessarily all the rules, or it'll probably be barely any of the rules specifically because, nice. Preview. It won't have the detailed rules, and we do want to kind of put a disclaimer out there that we're going to talk about the rules from stuff we've read or watched already from other people, but don't take our word for the rules being exactly how they are, because we might get stuff wrong. It is kind of just based off what we've come across so far. And so with that said, the game we are previewing in this first preview video is...
Going around old forts.
I was like, did you get a picture in the time I was talking?
No,
The
but
game
the
is
real
called
one
TP.
is
It's called TP. Oh no, it's called Fort. So we're going to be talking about the game Fort, which is by Leader Games, being published by Leader Games, which I guess would be considered a small publisher still, technically, since they probably only have like a handful of games so far. But they came onto the scene, to my knowledge, a few years ago with their game Vast, the Crystal Caverns, on Kickstarter, which I did.
you have.
Here, Vast.
There you
go. Which got a lot of attention because it was a asymmetrical game, which we'll talk about in a bit. And then I think maybe the year or so later, they came out with Root. All of these, the Root, a game of woodland might and right, which is also an asymmetrical game, but that got a lot of attention. That like blew up, and that was a big deal. And so that, I think that's kind of mainly how they got their name out there. They did, I think, Kickstarter another game called Oath in the same world as Root. More of kind of like, maybe it was like an RPG or campaign kind of game. And then now they are releasing Fort. And so Fort is a game for, was it 2 to 4 players, I believe? And it seems like it plays in about like half an hour to an hour. Probably more towards an hour, I would say. Maybe
45 to an hour.
Yeah. And so the
Never
theme,
played it.
though,
No idea.
The theme, if you do, I mean, you can look this up on Board Game Geek too. Actually, let me do that real quickly while I'm talking to help out with some of the details. But as you can see on the box, the art style, for those of you who have seen Root, I believe it might be by the same artist. And the idea of Fort, or the theme, which is kind of charming, kind of cute, is that you're basically playing as kids who want to build a fort and who want to eat pizza and want to collect toys. That's like all kids want to do. That would be nice if I could do that too. But that's
Do that from time to time.
that is the theme. Your kids competing to build your forts, play with your other friends, get toys and pizza. And so I did actually pull up it on Board Game Geek right now. So let me just share it briefly. And the way it'll play, to our knowledge, is you're basically going to go in turn order. and you're going to have your own player board, and you're going to have your cards, which are basically all the kids you guys are playing with, all your friends. And the game is a deck building game, which usually wouldn't get my attention that much, but I did actually go out of my way a little bit to bring this to John's attention because he likes deck builders. But I think the other mechanics that are paired with it are actually very interesting, and it makes it a game that I want to preview, meaning that I think I will get it in the future, so then we can even do an actual review of it later on. And so as you can see, it's, for 2 to 4 players, 20 to 40 minutes. So it's not that long of a game, but it has some pretty interesting choices and interesting mechanics that go with it, which is the main part we'll talk about. We'll mainly talk about the mechanics that we find that are interesting, not interesting, and how we think it'll actually feel when they're all paired together in the game. And just before we start going on to those, I will just show a picture of the components I mentioned. And so as you guys can see, you have your own player boards, the cards you're playing up, you have your hand of cards that you're going to play on your turn, and you have a look at how the cards are formatted. You have your yard, you have your lookout on the side of your board here, and you have your fort size that you're building up, and a victory point tracker up here, and tokens for toys, tokens for pizza, which are actually kind of the resources in the game. So yeah, so this is what the game looks like set up. And so what would you want to actually mention first, John?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so from kind of an initial look, as we were mentioning, it is a deck builder, or it has deck building elements to the game, and it is a kind of Euro game in the sense of you're trying to achieve victory points in order to win and beat your opponents, is you're building the fort. So so there's, as we're kind of showing here, a number of different components. You have your cards, of course, and your player board that you're working with. So the player board here, it kind of outlines all the different stuff. It's a nice board overall, right? It has the turn summary on how kind of turns go, so you don't need separate reference cards on how to play the game. You just have your player board, which is what you're going to be using the whole game. It, has nice colors. There's all the different, character or player boards that are different colors. They're the same, but this game is not trying to be asymmetrical like we were mentioning these developers typically do. So this is kind of a slight branch away from that style, but you've got these different spaces for where you put your stuff. As a kid, you usually collect a lot of stuff. You've got a backpack, right? So, when kids go out to play, you've got a backpack where you can store that stuff that you have. And then you also have the fort that you're building on the bottom, the tracker for how you can make a bigger fort, which costs those resources of the stuff that you're collecting over time. And then, of course, every fort has a lookout in case you've got those darn girls that are coming to join you in your boys only fort, or
Cooties!
those girls who are like, boys are lame and don't want any boys coming to their forts. So lots of fun opportunities and options in that space.
So with mentioning again that it's not asymmetrical, so to clarify for people who haven't heard of that term for board games before, and John and I, right, you and I had this lengthy discussion on the right way to actually use the term, because it is kind of a hot
from
term
our perspective
in the board game industry nowadays, that I feel personally that people kind of use too willy-nilly, use it too loosely to kind of bring attention to their game, when I would say it's not a very good way of describing their game, but it's just kind of, it kind of applies, so I'll say it and it'll draw people's attention, which is misleading. But an asymmetrical game in the vein of Root, like by Leader Games, or other ones like Android Netrunner, there's been a number of them over the last handful of years that have kind of started that idea of an asymmetrical board game. And the way it works is basically, it's the idea that most games we play are symmetrical, meaning our options that each player can do are the same. Whether it's like in more classic older games like Uno, we're all playing with the same cards, right? Not exactly the same hand of cards, but it's still just those deck of cards. We're taking the same action on the turn of putting a card, matching in a certain way for our turn to go. And so that's basically what a symmetrical game is, like, and that's most games, actually. Most games, you would think of most games that exist, like chess, right? You're two sides with same pieces going at it, taking different actions by your choice, but those actions available to you are still the same. The pieces available to both players are still the same. And
At
so
least
then
when you start. At least when you start. So
and so that's what a symmetrical game is. That's kind of just traditional. Everyone's playing the same game, same way, just maybe different strategies and such. But then an asymmetrical game is generally one where the players are all playing differently. It's obviously probably relatively easier to design for two players because you just make two people play differently. But a lot of these games nowadays are having multiple player games where every player is playing differently, So one example, did we mention when we were talking back then about Space Cadet?
Mm-hmm.
We consider that asymmetrical?
It is asymmetrical.
Yeah, so Space Cadet came out probably a handful of years ago now. It's asymmetrical in that it's a co-op game where you're all kind of running your own stations on your ship, so it's cooperative, but then each person who's assigned to a station is doing some different task, right? They have different pieces that they're playing with, and they're doing something different. It could be flicking a certain range to indicate like your power level or something like that. You're running the engines that way, where then someone else is rolling dice to get the right symbols to move the ship a certain way. And so that's kind of a sense of what an asymmetrical game can be like. Everyone's playing this game together, and yet they're having to do different things that don't actually even directly copy each other,
Yeah, you're doing something that is different than the other player in the game, or other players in the case if there's more than one player. So basically you're not using the same set of actions or the same set of rules on how you play the game to reach, and sometimes maybe even reaching certain objectives that may be different, completely different than another player for their objective. So
and so yeah, so
but that's not for it.
Yeah, so Fort isn't that, so we don't want to spend too much time talking about that. If you're interested about that, you might hear us review Root in the future, or other games like
Space
Blood
Cadets.
of an Englishman. Huh? What did you say?
Space Cadets.
Space Cadets. And so, yeah, so asymmetrical is a really cool category of games, I would say. I think it's very clever, but it's obviously, you can imagine it's hard to make it work well, right? Different gameplay styles all put together at the same time. And so for Fort, which is a symmetrical game by this company, going back to its mechanics now, being a deck builder is obviously not new. That's a standard category of games nowadays. But then one thing that I think is cool that the game pairs with it, is the idea that, and I think thematically it's cool to explain it, how you have your hand of friends, and let me see if I can pull up a picture of the cards again. So there's a deck of cards which are all these kids: Rocket Bros, Penny, Doc, Dot, Einstein. And so you have these friends that you could potentially play with, basically, and they can be in your hand. And then you even have like cards that you might start with that are your best friends who will never leave you. But then for the rest of the cards, when you play them on your turn, you will go into the kind of abilities, bonuses you get for it. But then for the cards you don't play, in a normal deck builder, you just discard everything, right? Like the cards you do play and the cards you don't play, they just get discarded and you draw a new hand. But in this game, you discard your best friends that you didn't play, which sounds bad, but it's actually good in the game. And then the cards you didn't play that were still in your hand go into your yard, which is kind of on top of your player board. And what that means is basically it's like you didn't play with those friends, so they're just kind of out there waiting, if you will. But what that does is there's a phase on every player's turn where they can recruit a new card, either from, I think, the pool of cards, the row of cards that are available from the deck, or they can take a friend from another player's yard. Stealing friends, that's what the game is about. But I thought that was kind of
Bishops
the
are
main
so
thing.
fickle.
That was, yeah, kids, they just go wherever there's pizza and toys. That was actually the main mechanic that stuck out to me that made me want to share this with John. This idea of such a big twist, I would say, because in a lot of deck builders too, traditionally, you want to get cards that help you kind of, shorten your deck, weed out some of the cards that you don't want to keep using. But then this mechanic is a way to get rid of cards that you're not going to use that you don't think will help any combos you set up in your deck later on. But at the same time, it's a way for people to also mess up your deck, right? Where if you're playing cards on one turn to pull off some combo, but then you aren't able to pull off the other combos that the rest of your cards do, then you risk someone stealing that card, and maybe disrupting that combo you had set up in your deck. So yeah, what do you think about that?
And as we've kind of talked about deck builders in the past before, right? Typically strategies in deck building games are often around efficiency of cards synergizing and working together in order to reach whatever objectives that you need to do in the game, right? To gain most victory points or to be able to buy the most points in cards or whatever in these standard deck building type of games. So why this mechanic is interesting, and Ben is alluding to a lot of it, and why it would be very interesting since we haven't played it, and something I think we are looking forward to, of something we'd like to see, is because you really only play a card at a time, you're playing a friend at a time during your turns, you often don't have a lot of opportunities to play all of the friends in your hand. So you're going to, right? You can only spend so much time with certain friends. And so there's some friends who are going to be left out and they're just going to be hanging out. So maybe they'll stay around in your yard and then you'll be able to see them later. Or they may go to somebody else's yard because they're like, hey, I like you and I got pizza and toys. Come on over here. And then they'll go. There's traitors. You're not allowed to afford anymore, right? That's the idea behind this. And I think that's something that's really cool about this, because now in this kind of deck building game, it's not so much a focus of making sure all your cards maybe necessarily synergize exactly, but now it's more of a, how do you ensure that you're getting the friends or using friends that are leading you to be able to build your fort, or get more toys, get more pizza, or whatever other things that you'd like to do in this game. So I think that's the part that's really cool. I think the other thing though that we haven't really talked about from the card kind of look is that that's still okay, I think, overall, to be losing friends, because as you can see on the cards that we're showing here right now, when you play cards, it's not something that most of the time is not something that only benefits the player who plays it, right? There are some shared actions. So if you look at the cards here on the screen, there's kind of those two rectangular white boxes that signify what those friends do in time, right? Or when they're used, right? Where some of them, so on the bottom one with the little person face on it, it's a special action only for the person who played that friend for the turn that they get to do. But the top one allows other people to benefit from that kid in the neighborhood, right? So it's not always something that only benefits the person who plays it, but right, they're kids in the neighborhood. They may have multiple friends and they may, help out this other kid's fort too, right? Ben's fort, even though clearly my fort is a better fort than Ben's, but I guess he can help him out a little bit because he's kind of a friend for Ben, right?
Yeah, and that's when we get into kind of how the cards actually play, right? The way you described it, the two rows. And actually the top row, the one that benefits other people, if you guys are familiar with other games like Race for the Galaxy or even Tiny Epic Galaxies, those games have that kind of follow mechanic where after the first player or main player, active player, plays a card or does their action, it allows the other players in like a clockwise order to choose to do the same action for some cost or something like that. So then you're able to take actions, in a sense, out of turn, which is kind of a nice thing for modern games, right? It keeps the pace going, right? You're still able to do actions when it's not your turn. But then in this game, it's a little different because when you choose to follow, it sounds like you have to also follow the exact way that player did it. So most of these actions you can see, and there is a reference card which we'll show later. The reference card shows you what all these symbols mean, but it's basically just different kinds of resources like get a toy, get pizza, victory points, multiplied by however many of a certain suit or symbol you choose to discard from your hand at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but if like a player, I believe if they do like the top action that says like collect a toy for trading in shovels, and you trade in 2 shovels or cards with 2 shovels on it and you get 2 toys, I think anyone who follows also has to be able to do that exact amount.
Mm.
Like they don't get to choose to do just 1 shovel, even though that's what the symbol says.
Yeah.
You are actually following what the player did. Correct me if I'm wrong, if you heard differently, John.
I have no idea. I haven't played it, and I only listened to the initial rules, so
that is what it seemed like when I watched the gameplay too. Because I remember a time where maybe the action on the card was like get a toy or a pizza, and so whichever that player chose, the other player following had to choose that same thing, I believe. And so that's interesting. It's an interesting kind of limitation, right, on the standard rule of following a player's action, which I think is good. It's a way to not just make it too helpful for everyone, but it's like I got to choose a thing that's helpful for me, and it's more like up to chance if it is helpful for the other people following.
Mm-hmm.
And so so that's kind of how these cards play. And then there's also, can I go to the reference card that I mentioned, which it's a really nice component, and we'll talk about components later. But as you can see, there's all the suits of cards, and then the different symbols and what they mean on the card. So it's basically to make the card less about reading all the text, which is nice, because actually now that I think about it, a lot of deck builders do have cards with text, right, that you need to read to figure out how to play them. Mm-hmm. So making it into symbols, and ideally more intuitive symbols, right? Mm-hmm. It can make the game kind of smoother. And it seems like component-wise, there's 4 of these big reference cards in the game. So everyone can get one, because it annoys me when games just don't print enough for all the player counts. It's like, why? You know how many players you said your game can play. Why doesn't everyone get this card? It's not even like a expensive thing. Just print another card, please. Mm-hmm. And it's big. I think it's pretty big. Like this picture obviously doesn't show it, but it's actually like much larger than a regular card, I believe.
Is it tarot size?
I think even bigger. Even bigger. It might be. The component page doesn't show, but it seemed like something closer to the player board size. But I don't remember exactly right now. But yeah, so it's pretty big.
For us with bad eyesight.
Yeah. It's just nice that they, provide something like that and don't skimp on it, and so aside from that, is there any other mechanic that sticks out to you, John?
I mean, otherwise, it's, as we kind of mentioned, it's a Euro-style game, so there are conditions to end the game according to the rules, where the ultimate objectives to try to win this game is you can either build your fort, right, to build the biggest fort first, which will trigger the end of the game. So that's one way to end the game. Another way to end the game is that all the friends cards run out in the friends deck. So basically all the kids in the neighborhood have been tapped to play with. So there's nobody else to play with. So we're done. No one wants to play in this neighborhood anymore. The neighborhood's shut down. Or the third one is if a player reaches 25 points in the victory point tracker, which is different tracking than the fort, from my understanding of the game, where you do get a certain amount of points for completing your fort, but it's not tracked on the victory point tracker. So it is a separate tracking instance of gaining points. But there are various cards various friends and things throughout the game that will allow you to get points. And then there's also personal, I think they're called made-up rules in the game, but they're personal objectives or personal goals for you as a player, that when I think you build the first level of your fort, you gain one of those. as a special objective to gain additional points at the end of the game. All right. If you meet or reach a certain condition or criteria within the game. Don't know what those are. I didn't watch the full how to play or walkthrough play of a game, but yeah, I would say otherwise, I mean, it seems pretty typical of like turn order wise of how people play the cards. Oh, so I'm actually going to mention from an initial look at this, one thing that I think overall the game looks really good. One thing I'm actually slightly disappointed about is the way that they do the lookout in the sense of the board look. So when I'm thinking of a lookout is somebody who's kind of perched up in the tree and is kind of giving a lookout. So they're kind of sitting in the fort trying to see. And so from a component standpoint, I see why they did it the way they did it, because if you look at the board that Ben is showing here on the screen right now, there's a little lookout section that basically you have those symbols as a part of your lookout. So in the future, any cards that you're playing, those symbols can be used at any time for whatever cards you're using. But to me, one of the unfortunate things about the way that they built this out is that you don't get to see the artwork of the card that's in the lookout, right? So in my mind, it's like, this is a friend that's sticking with you to the end, right? Because they're your lookout, right? So they have a very special role in your fort. So it almost feels like I wish they reversed it to have the lookout be on the other side of the board, on the right-hand side, where you can still show the symbols, but then you get to see the friend poking out on the side. It would add a little bit of clutter, so maybe that's the reason why from a design standpoint they didn't put it there, because then there's another card that you're seeing out there, and you don't want to confuse with what you're playing. But I also think it's a sad opportunity, a lost opportunity to see the friends that are kind of in your lookout station, right?
That's true.
I don't know if there would have been a better way for them to build it, because you can actually have more than one lookout. But that to me was kind of, because they have such unique artwork, and I believe every single friend is a different artwork.
Yeah, I think so.
From what it looks like. Again, I don't know component wise, but all of it is unique art, and to basically hide that art, and you don't even see what friend it is that is sitting as a lookout. It's kind of sad. So.
Yeah, that's a good point. If there was a way to like stagger or splay the cards differently to show the friends still. I mean, the way they are doing it is very traditional, in games like Imperial Settlers, right? Whenever you have that option to kind of permanently sacrifice a card, this card will never come back to your hand to play, but you're sacrificing it to get its resource or symbol all the time permanently. It seems to always be done in a similar way of like, there is one part of the card that is that symbol, and that's the part that you tuck the rest of the card under your board and then just have that symbol shown. So it's true. This is done pretty standard.
It's done standardly, and that's why from a mechanics standpoint, I think it's clean and I think it's fine. But from the theme and the design of the game, it feels a little unfortunate, because it's like, they are a lookout, and like the idea of a lookout, it's like you don't sacrifice the kid forever, right? To the fort gods as you're building your fort or something like that.
Sacrifice the kid in your fort.
Yeah. The kid in the fort would be a kid that's sitting right in your treehouse or in your fort or whatever that you're building, as a part of your entourage of kids trying to make the best fort in the place. So again, that's to me something that I noticed, and usually I'll say honestly, this is not something I typically see, but it did feel like something that was kind of like,
Yeah, actually, when I first heard about the lookout mechanic, I was like kind of watching a video at the time. I was like, oh, is this the lookout? But that's the yard,
Yep.
It's like, oh, but that's like the top of your board. Wouldn't that have made sense?
Yeah.
But then this does bring up the point of, again, going back to the cards, an interesting thing with more modern game design is the cards having multiple uses, right? Which is kind of a cool idea too, right? It's a way to put more options into your game with the same components, right? Without introducing like a different set of deck of cards for this kind of option, for the lookout, for example. And then one kind of card to just get pizza or something like that, but you have the same cards either being able to, one, have people give you a general action that other people can follow, then also the action that benefits only the person who plays the card, then the symbol that the friend could provide if you put them into your lookout, and then I guess that's it. Maybe those three are the main things I can think of. And
the suit is also
That's
used
right.
not only for the lookout, but you can also use it for discarding to activate the powers.
And actually, that is the big thing you do,
and that's
right?
the huge
Most
part.
of the time to get the resources in the game. So that's true too. That's a fourth way that the card is useful. And so, I think that's a cool design choice to have that for your cards, have them be multi-use. Obviously, in other games, the issue with that is then it starts cluttering your cards, which I think in this game, like you can see kind of like half of the cards are filled with the symbols, the things they could do. But I think at least it does look like they fit the kids on the card still, which I think is a accomplishment, if you will. That like even looking at these cards in this row up here, it's like, okay, yeah, like I can see the kids clearly with their name. They don't seem like squished necessarily, but that might be just due to the art style itself. It's like this really kind of, I don't know, kind of like Rugrat size, like kid artwork.
I mean, they're kids. They're not going to be big. So
Yeah.
they're not going to they shouldn't need to take up a whole card per se. And it's nice too, because you can even see that there's personality to the characters as well, to all the different people within these cards. And again, we haven't played the game, so we don't know the full theme, but it seems like there's probably, like, based on the symbol that they are to the artwork on their cards, kind of plays somewhat to maybe the actions or the skills of those cards too. Again, we haven't really played it, but there was a couple of characters that I saw when you were showing the other screen of, like, Smoke, I think was one of the kids' names, and I believe it looked like he could steal stuff from another player. Right there, Smoke, the wild one. So kind of in the bottom. So from a thematic standpoint, Smoke, right, is kind of like shifty or like hidey, silent, all that stuff. Ninja, right? So you think a kid with the nickname Smoke is going to be one of these sneaky kids that steals stuff from other people.
Well, that's not his nickname.
What a good. That's his actual name.
That was his given name. How dare
Smoke.
you? Smoke McGrabby.
Right. And so it kind of looks like these characters all have maybe some thematic elements and things to kind of these nicknames and things that kids might have, right? So that's also, from a design and theme standpoint, seems pretty cool and pretty.
But actually, since you mentioned that, I did notice, like, the game isn't just colorful, but the actual color corresponds to their their symbol, their resource, their symbol. And so even the rainbow wild one, like his background is rainbow, And so that's a nice touch, kind of like putting the color in the background, but then also the symbol, because the symbols are important. I would say more and more nowadays, because of like people wanting to make their games colorblind friendly, right? So to do it in this way, it looks really nice. Like, I think just from looking at the components itself, it's like the color really pops, but then in a small design way, it does serve that purpose of indicating the suit, right? The symbols. So that's a nice little touch.
Yep.
And then I would say, like, the last thing I would say about the components are, well, one of the things I love component wise is these player boards. And actually, let me go to the picture of just them. They are what are known as double layered player boards, or recessed player boards, where it's 2 layers. So these are actually like indented slots where the resources fit in themselves, right? Your little peg for keeping track of your fort's level and size, and then even the hexagon cubes that indicate toys and pizza, which is also an interesting component. Not saying that I necessarily like it, but it is better than punch out tokens, which is what I would normally expect. It's like this in a sense, in a lesser produced game, I would just imagine as a single layer board with an area that says stuff and punch out tokens for toys and pizza. So you just throw it into this little part of your board, But these are actually like recessed or indented, so they actually fit here, which always feels nice in a game, especially since it gives the security of like not just bumping the table and things get moved out of the way or something like that. So dual layered player boards, very nice, very nice. And then of course, I would say overall, actually, I don't have a picture of it, but if you guys actually see the game, the size is actually doesn't look that big either. Like all these components, like I think the biggest like dimension wise are the player boards, and then the box seems to be designed to fit basically the size of the player boards and stacking everything in the box that way. And so then the box, in at least from what I could see, comes out to maybe about like this size. This is my guess from what I slightly remember from a video. But like the size of like a Century Spice Road box. And so that's really nice, right? That's like a really good size. And it's like priced at, I think it's like $30.
That's not bad.
Yeah, which is pretty good. I think on miniature market it's like $25. So yeah, I think retail maybe like $30. So that seems like a really good deal. That's why I do want to pick it up for us to try some point in the future when we can try it. And it's actually for those of you who play on Tabletop Simulator, Leader Games actually commissioned a version of their game to be created on Tabletop Simulator, and it's free. So you can even try it on there for free, which is really cool to see too. Like a publisher willing to do that, put it out there for free just for people to try if they don't get to actually play it in person. So that's really cool.
And also like pandemic time.
Yeah.
Probably don't have a lot of board game situations right now to play in person. So
yeah.
A good way for them to get their word out for their game.
So yeah, so that's Fort. Look at a preview of the components, what mechanics are in it, what we thought was interesting and are looking forward to with the game. So we do hope to get, we meaning me, John, you're not going to buy this.
We'll see. It might be good. I
But I'll probably get it.
I'll
We'll
probably
play
try
it in the
tabletop
future.
now. It does seem like a fun, quick game.
That's true. We can do it on tabletop right now, like I just said. Because I did add it already too. But yeah, hopefully we can play it in person though, and actually get the full experience sometime in the future, and do a proper review of the game later on after this preview. So if you guys found this interesting, I hope you'll share it with your friends. Hope you'll check out the game yourself. And until next time, we'll see you then. Bye.
Peace.